Educated graphic designers will tell you that graphic design is visual communication. And sure, yes, it is. But that's just one of the phrases we all nod along to without ever really asking what it truly means. From an advanced mindset anyway. And so the first thing I want to show you is that yes, visual communication is a means of using color, typography, shape, everything taught in the principles of design as a means to inform or persuade or influence an audience. But that is just the surface level or basic understanding of visual communication. We want to go deeper here at Satori Graphics. So Patagonia and Supreme both sell apparel, and they both use red. Okay, well, one is slightly more orange. But visually, they are communicating to completely different groups of tribes or people. Or we can think of them as tribes because this will help us better understand this teaching that we're going to talk about now. Patagonia's branding says, "I care about nature, quality and longevity." Supreme, on the other hand, communicates scarcity, cultural references and belonging to a particular community. And if you swap their visual identities overnight, waking up the next morning or the next day would not mean that each brand suddenly inherits the other's audience. The people looking at those brands have already built entirely different meanings around them over many years. And automatically, thinking in this way will just shift your approach to every design project you embark on. And if I had to give you a quick pointer before we look at some examples, I would say instead of asking yourself, what does this design communicate? You should start asking a much more useful question. What will this particular audience believe this communicates? Now those are two completely different questions. One assumes that the meaning is fixed. The other recognizes that meaning is created in the mind of the viewer and it changes from person to person. So let's extend your understanding here and cement it into your brain. Monzo and HSBC are both banks of sorts. They both allow you to spend money. This is a visual communication guide video, so let's try and think about the visual communication of Monzo. Most people who use Monzo are young adults. They are modern, they are up to date with technology, and they are often first-time banking users. So with this in mind, what sort of visual language should be used? Well, breaking it down quickly, we have bold colors, oversized typography, playful layouts and friendly illustrations that communicate simplicity, confidence and modern banking. And this makes the brand feel approachable to younger, more digital-minded people who want finance to feel less intimidating and more like a lifestyle product. And quickly, HSBC mainly has a very different audience, and so the visual language will be different there too. But the important takeaway from this first section is simply that a beginner or intermediate designer will understand that visual languages are made up of certain things. But an advanced designer, they can easily choose and see how different visual languages or communications will work on different audiences. But very briefly before we move on, if for whatever reason Monzo's target audience shifted to that of young professionals, how do you think the visual communication should change? Now I've gone ahead and given this some thought. Notice how the visual communication, the visual language has shifted from playful and energetic to calm, ambitious and refined. The typography has had a weight loss journey, yet still uses the lowercase sans serif. The photography, the muted colors, the premium materials, they all now communicate career progression and long-term success, making the brand feel far more relevant to young professionals rather than first-time bank users. But here's a great example of how visual communication can really change perspectives, even with just a few subtle changes. So for this coffee brand, ask yourself, how much would you pay to sip away on this? Whatever you think is a reasonable price, just keep that number in mind for a moment. And then look at this second coffee brand. Now, ask yourself, how much would you expect to pay for this coffee? And be honest with yourself. Now, both designs use a similar color palette, but I am sure that most people would instinctively expect the second brand to demand more money than the first. And quickly, why is that? Well, because it communicates through confidence, through precision and subtlety. It's simply the refined serif typography, careful proportions, elegant hierarchy, and understated graphic details. They all suggest craftsmanship rather than mass production. And those are visual cues we've actually collectively learned to associate with more expensive and more premium products over time. And here's a simple rule that I personally use on projects. Always ask, is every design decision helping communicate the same perception? If your typography is suggesting premium, but your imagery and your photography says low budget, then it's probably not going to fly. Strong visual communication happens when every single decision is pointing the audience towards the exact or same conclusion. But that direction is something you need to conclude from the brief and the research, which is why it is so darn crucial. So next, in terms of visual communication, I want to talk about and show you, well, magic actually. Magicians and graphic designers have one surprising thing in common. Neither one wants you to look everywhere. They both want you to look at one very specific place or a few specific places and at one very specific moment. A magician controls your attention so you don't notice the trick. A designer controls your attention so you don't miss the encoded message within their pixel creation. And let me show you a real example from my own channel. These two thumbnails were A/B tested against each other on YouTube. It's the same title, it's the same video, same audience. Yet one outperformed the other by a huge margin. Most designers would immediately ask, well, why did this one win? And I think there's a much better question. What is the winning thumbnail stopping you from looking at elsewhere on YouTube? Your eyes don't wander around searching for information. They land almost instantly on the face, then they see the word survive, and only then do they notice these small supporting details. It's a guided experience, it stands out, and there are almost no competing decisions to make. Compare that to this version. The large block of text competes with the portrait, then the smaller text starts asking for attention as well. Nothing is technically wrong with it as such, but your brain has to negotiate between multiple entry points before it understands the message. But those tiny fractions of a second do matter, because the winning thumbnail succeeded in stopping more viewers looking elsewhere on YouTube's UI. And this is the important part here, context does matter. On my thumbnail design, for example, the context is that of people scrolling YouTube, but your context for your next project might be a poster, a flyer, an internet advert banner. So what do you do in terms of directing a viewer in where they should be or should not be looking? Well, firstly, don't ask yourself, what are you showing them? You should ask, what are you stopping them from looking at? And that is a completely different way from analyzing a design. A practical way to use this is what I call the attention thief test. Before you finish any design, cover the main message or the hero elements for a moment, and then take a look at everything else around it. You can ask yourself, what is currently stealing attention that has really not earned the right to be here or be noticed? It could be a secondary image, a decorative shape, a bright color, a texture, a badge, a line of copy that really, it could go if you ask your client. But once you spot the thief, don't immediately delete it. Reduce it first, make it smaller, quieter, lower contrast, maybe further away, or just remove it completely. And that is if it has no real job or purpose being there. The goal is to make sure the viewer has fewer places to escape before they reach the message, because very often, stronger visual communication is not created by adding more emphasis to the important things. It is by removing things that are secretly just competing with it. Something that often gets lost in the teaching of visual communication is as follows. A lot of visual communication lives in memory, and this is such an important teaching to hear and to learn. Communication only finishes once something has been stored in the mind after they've, looked away from your design. That's why some logos, adverts, or designs in general disappear from your memory within a few seconds, while others stay with you for years. Take the FedEx logo for example. At first glance, it's just a typography, and then someone points out the hidden arrow between the E and the X, and suddenly you're probably never going to unsee that again. Nothing about this logo has changed as such. The only thing that really has changed was your brain discovering something, and that tiny moment of surprise acts almost like a memory hook. Also, the strong heavy branding of orange and purple is surely burned into your memory as well. And the same thing happens all over the place, with the WWF Panda logo for example. It's not the most detailed animal illustration ever created, but its simplicity allows your brain to recognize it almost instantly while quietly reinforcing the organization's entire mission of protecting wildlife. What you can do on your work is to ask yourself one final question. What will still exist in somebody's mind tomorrow after they've forgotten almost everything they've looked at today? The highest level of visual communication leaves behind an idea, not just an image. And instead of leaving your graphic design education journey today, just click a video on screen right now to continue that journey onwards. But until next time, design your future today. Peace.